Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is me, Sumaira Salim. You're watching Desi TV USA. Let's see what's happening in the world. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is speaking to reporters ahead of the annual meeting of world leaders at the UN General Assembly.
Paralyzing the global response to the dramatic challenges we face. Our world is blighted by war, battered by climate chaos, scared by hate, and shamed by poverty, hunger, and inequality. Conflicts and unrest continue to rage. The war in Ukraine is devastating a country and dragging down the global economy. And despite the Black Sea Grain Initiative and the agreement that we are doing everything to make it happen in reality, to get Russian food and fertilizers to global markets, there is a real risk of multiple famines this year. Global hunger began to rise before the pandemic and has never recovered. And the cost of living crisis is hitting the poorest people and communities hardest, with dramatic effects. And the rights of women and girls are going into reverse, and most developing countries have no fiscal space and no access to the financial resources needed to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and protecting their people from the devastating impact of climate change. The solidarity envisioned in the United Nations Charter is being devoured by the acids of nationalism and self-interest, by a shocking disregard for the poorest and most vulnerable in our world, by politicians who play to people's worst instincts for partisan gain, by prejudice, discrimination, misinformation, and hate speech that pit people against one another, and by a global financial system that penalizes those with the least, by fossil fuel corporations killing the planet to rake in the most. My speech to the General Assembly will address these issues with concrete recommendations and a call to action. As fractures deepen and trust evaporates, we need to come together around solutions. Solutions like those that will be showcased at the Transforming Education Summit. People need to see results in their everyday lives, or they will lose faith in their governments and institutions, and they will lose hope in the future. And so this year's general debate must be about providing hope and overcoming the divisions that are dramatically impacting in the world.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres holds a news conference ahead of annual gathering of world leaders of the UN General Assembly, which begins on 20th September with a high-level debate. The General Secretary of the United Nations is talking about the floods disaster in Pakistan.
John, we'll take a question or two. Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen of the media, thank you very much for your presence and welcome. I have just returned from Pakistan, where I looked through a window into the future. A future of permanent and ubiquitous climate chaos on an unimaginable scale. Devastating loss of life, enormous human suffering, and massive damage to infrastructure and livelihoods. It is simply heartbreaking. No picture can convey the scope of this catastrophe. The flooded area is 3 times the size of my entire country, Portugal. And what is happening in Pakistan demonstrates the sheer inadequacy of the global response to the climate crisis and the betrayal and injustice at the heart of it. Whether it is Pakistan, the Horn of Africa, the Sahel, small islands, or least developed countries, the world's most vulnerable, who did nothing to cause this crisis, are paying a horrific price for decades of intransigence by big emitters. G20 countries are responsible for 80% of emissions. And they are also suffering the impact of record droughts, fires, and floods. But climate action seems to be flatlining. If 1/3 of G20 countries was underwater today, as it could be tomorrow, perhaps they would find it easier to agree on drastic cuts to emissions. All countries with the G20 leading the way, must boost their national emissions, must reduce their targets, must boost their national emissions reduction, and must limit the world's temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. Pakistan and other climate hotspots need flood-resilient infrastructure now. And those most responsible for emissions must step up with the funds for adaptation. At least half of all climate finance and climate resilience should go to adaptation to protect people and the economy.
Ned Price said Pakistan's F-16 program, an important part of the broader US-Pakistan relationship. On 8 September, the US State Department approved $450 million in aid of Pakistan's potential F-16 aircraft repair and the maintenance program. The possible sales of these services would not provide Pakistan aircraft with new weapons and the capabilities, but rather maintenance of existing capabilities. In response to a question, the US spokesperson said during a press briefing, "We have recently notified Congress of the proposed sales of $450 million worth of maintenance and end-use services to the Pakistan Air Force's F-16 program." Ned Price continued and said that Pakistan is an important partner in the counter-terrorism and its long-standing US policy to provide maintenance and the rehabilitation packages for such programs.
Recently notified Congress of a proposed foreign military sale valued at $450 million, as you said, for maintenance and sustainment services for the Pakistani Air Force's F-16 terrorism partner. And as part of our long-standing policy, we provide life cycle maintenance and sustainment packages for U.S. origin platforms. Pakistan's F-16 program, it's an important part of the broader U.S.-Pakistan bilateral relationship. And this proposed sale will sustain Pakistan's capability to meet current and future counterterrorism threats by maintaining the F-16 fleet. This is a fleet that allows Pakistan to support counterterrorism operations, and we expect Pakistan will take sustained action against all terror.
Prince William and Harry walked side by side behind their grandmother, Queen Elizabeth's coffin, a scene reminiscent of the when they followed their mother, Princess Diana's casket in the glare of the global media 25 years ago. In military school established in Russia, children receive training in mathematics and history as well as in the use of military equipment. The purpose of these schools was to produce a military and patriotic elite under state leadership. President Tokayev, in recognition of his extraordinary contribution in consolidation friendship between the two people and promoting Kazakhstan-China relations. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said that we have recovered up to 35 billion rupees from consumers who used up to 300 units of electricity from all over Pakistan. An immediate relief of 14 billion is being given in May.
पूरे पाकिस्तान में 300 यूनिट्स तक जो बिजली इस्तेमाल करते हैं उनके सार्फिन जो हैं उनसे हमने पहले ही 35 अरब रुपए की जो वसूली वो हमने ख़त्म कर दी थी, रोक दी थी। और अब सितंबर के महीने में मज़ीद 2 करोड़ 10 लाख सार्फिन के लिए 14 अरब रुपए का जो रिलीफ, फौरी रिलीफ दिया जा रहा है। और उनसे भी ये फ्यूल एडिशनल चार्ज सितंबर के महीने का वसूल नहीं किया जाएगा।
That's all for now. Keep watching Desi TV USA or log into our website, desitvusa.com.